also.
That makes a shoe very expensive then. Women's shoes are not the least expensive things in the world. That really makes it run up. How much for a man's shoe?
Heels on a man's shoe are $8.50 a pair.
Gee whiz.
And there's many different grades of the material too. We're seeing a tremendous influx of materials from Korea and Brazil, and they seem to be of lower grade rubber than the rubber that we have manufactured here in the United States.
Oh, welcome to our final class, and I promised that I'd speak today about final truths, and this was to try to end on a note of honesty and truth after all the errors we've been making all quarter. And I guess we spoke. Was it Nils that said that one of the great techniques of technical exposition is to tell lies at first, and then once a person understands the simple thing which isn't quite true, then you go into the exceptions which make it true. Well, this quarter I've been getting notes from people who have been looking over our handouts and haven't had a chance to speak themselves, and I'm not sure I'll represent their point of view perfectly, but I think it will at least provide a counterbalance to what I've been saying. And I'm really glad to see that Paul is back with us today too, so that he can get his last word in wherever we are. Now, so one of the things Paul emphasized to great advantage on Wednesday was the importance of organization, and I feel here a little guilty that I haven't got a great organization today. I'm going to go through my scheme is going to be to go through these notes that I've received and put them into a bit of order only. Now, first of all, I got several comments from Nancy Blackman's father, who's a professor at Berkeley. Isn't that right, Nancy? No? Where?
He works at GTE Sylvania.
Okay.
He writes papers.
He's a paper writer in the Bay Area. Yes, Nelson Blackman, and he caught me on the very handout number 2 here, where I said the above proof actually commits another sin against mathematical exposition, and he says it's better to say the proof above actually commits another sin against mathematical exposition. Yeah, peccavi. I was certainly sinning here myself, and I find that I do this rather often, and the reason must be because I don't find it unusual construction. On the other hand, so I don't quite agree with all of his comments that he put in the margin. We said above, below, afraid, alone, beneath, ahead, underneath are among the adjectives that never precede the nouns they modify, but go after. Well, now I don't view those all as adjectives, but I was using one as the above proof, so I was using it as an adjective there, although it's a preposition. And if you say the proof above, then you're sort of using it as a preposition with that whose object is implied, I guess. I'm not a scholar on these things, but below, I don't know if I would call it an adjective if I said the proof below or something, whatever. Above and below are, however, different. We say all of the above, none of the above. It's a common phrase that we now all understand, and it just happens that above has this as one of its meanings, and because above and below are parallel in some places doesn't mean that all of their meanings are going to be parallel to each other. Still, this would definitely be an improvement to put the above second, the word above second there. He circled IE here, and I suppose he just meant that was a stylistic lapse to go into Latin and formalism. I don't know. He wanted me to use a semicolon there because he felt that you needed more time to read the rest of the sentence or something. The proof was going too fast for your comprehension otherwise. It's a matter of pacing that you can best judge when you're second reading things. But the main thing I get from this is that I'm reminded that the style has to be your own, and you won't get, and there are going to be a lot of places where you're just going to have to agree to disagree, that there is no, what some people would never write, other people would always write and would think was better. And this, especially at this time of year, I'm reminded of this because my wife and I compose a newsletter every year telling the story of that year for our friends and relatives and so on. Many years ago, we realized that the only way to solve this problem was that she would write a paragraph and then I would write a paragraph. There was no way that we could both write a sentence that we would both think was was a good sentence. And we seem to get along 364 days of the year, except for the day that we tried to write a joint Christmas newsletter. There was just no way to make the two styles merge. But with the separate paragraphs, that works rather well. And even we even can say, wouldn't it be better to put a comma in the other person's paragraph? And sometimes we accept that as a valid improvement. Still, there's definitely a lot of variety and vive la différence. Now, Nancy, your father didn't like the way I spelled.
I wanted to make a comment. You know, Jimmy and Rosalind Carter wrote a book together. Here, Don. And
oh, there you are, Lynn.
yeah, and that was the comment that they made, that they can do everything else together in their life except they can't seem to write together, and it was the worst experience either of them had ever been through.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, I guess it would be the same with a co-author if you had to agree on every sentence of every paragraph, right? Now, Nancy's father didn't like the way we spelled hiccups here, and said that this is the proper way to spell it. So I looked it up in the dictionary. I looked it up first in Roget's, and Roget didn't even have this spelling. Had this spelling, and then in the other dictionary I had in my desk, this was the preferred spelling, and they said see also, or also sometimes spelled this way. But okay, that caught me by surprise. Okay, now here's one for Paul to look at. He cautioned us. Is this right? Is this a bad thing to use a noun as a verb? I don't know. But there wasn't the comment here from Nancy's father. But now here's something I don't understand. He said, it says, depending on the formula, the terms, relation, definition, statement, or theorem might be used. He wanted it to be term. It seems to me, yeah, I know, but still, I'm ready for a list of terms. But I suppose, literally speaking, if you wanted to look at this from a logical point of view, then we're saying that you're supposed to do, I don't know, there's the word or in there. It doesn't seem to me that I have to use more than one. Wanted to hyphenate programming language. Wanted to talk about programming language notation. Now, for me, I would be hyphenating words all over the place if I did that, because when I'm familiar with it, since it's in the field where programming language is commonly understood as sort of a sub-discipline by itself and wouldn't need it. But so the hyphen is sort of implied to me. I don't know.
May I make a comment?
Yes, Paul. What do you
The
think?
associative law should worry you. Is it a programming language notation or a programming language notation?
Yeah. There's absolutely no confusion to a computer scientist, you see, but to someone who isn't, I can see where this would happen. So I spoke once about random number generators and floating point arithmetic, and I had a book about these things, and I had to take out all the hyphens afterwards because it was just looking terrible. You referring them all the time. Okay, well, let's see. The next thing I wanted to show is about hopefully, I guess. No. While I see it here, I got another I got an interesting note from Leslie Lamport about proof by contradiction, so we should talk a little bit about that. And he started out, obviously, he wants to rile us right away. He says, I had to leave the tube just as Helmut was beginning to diatribe against proofs by, you know. No, I'm not. Even I have never seen diatribe before used as a verb, but that's great. In order to set a move, well, but he's saying, what about proof by contradiction? Are they always bad? And I don't think we ever said that they're always bad. What we said was that that there's such a thing as an unnecessary proof by contradiction, and if you can do it directly, do so. But he's pointing out a case where in his work on studying concurrent programs, that really contradiction turned out to be the natural, intuitive way to actually do it. And so let me state, in fact, that when you're solving a problem, probably the most efficient way to go about it is to try first the proof by contradiction. I mean, this is sort of a, so if I'm writing a book and the writing of the book is supposed to illustrate all the things that I tossed around in my mind as I was working on the problem myself, then the most honest presentation would probably be to say, well, I first tried proving by contradiction. Now, why is that? That's because it gives me more hypotheses. I got more power, more things to derive from. I can assume the contradiction. That gives me more assumptions, and therefore more of my theorems come to play. And so actually, when I'm working on a new problem, probably contradiction. I mean, it's not just that I'm a contrary person. I think that I need to get my juices stirred up in order to say no, it's wrong. But in fact, it gives you more. It gives you more to work with. On the other hand, it actually can limit the applicability of your theorem afterwards if you really need to rely on the contradiction, and it also can be very confusing to a reader. So there's this but there's this tension that happens, I think, in all problem solving. The method that you first try to solve something, it doesn't necessarily lead to the thing that you want to present in your final exposition of the solution. So there will certainly be cases where proofs by contradiction. I guess Paul mentioned this too, that he's not going to exclude the middle. He's not going to disallow. He's not going to go like intuitionist mathematics and say that you're not ever allowed to show that something is true because it can't be false. And I would hate to have that weapon removed too. Okay, now let's see. Another thing I wanted to show you that's short is in a paper that I was asked to referee recently, and I just want to show a very common error when mathematicians use tech. They believe that the best way to write fractions is the way they write them on a blackboard. And I think you can see here that this fraction would be much nicer if it had been done in the slashed form, n squared slash 3 instead of in these tiny numbers here, like this. And you see how it interferes with the looks. Now, the people behind the scenes at journals have been doing this for years. Mathematicians give them manuscripts that have these fractions done like this, and then the copyeditors know how to make these changes. And make the thing come out. But now the mathematicians are getting this in their own hands, and they're going to bypass the copy editors, and they're going to ruin everything if they don't learn about some fractions about when some fractions look better than others. Okay. Comments on that. Okay. Next was things about hopefully. Now. We had this wonderful essay near the beginning of the quarter, I guess it's handout number 4, that talks about hopefully. And Mary Claire, I passed it out more for the style of writing of the essay than for the actual semantics of it, which also makes points about the word hopefully. But I just put it out as a sort of a marvelous essay in general, and it was an exposition of a technical point. As an example of exposition is the reason I handed this out. Now, so Mary Claire then sends me a note, says, actually, now that you decided to put this to a wider audience, I reread it again, and I thought it was terrible. And so she said, so she definitely has to change two things about this essay to improve it. And I think this is interesting to see the before and after, because I started with this and I thought it was very nice, but then she looked at it and she thought, oh, this got to be fixed up. And so the first thing she points out is, she says, look at, given that I'm going to need to say 1637, I have to say something else instead of late in the 16th century. So here she definitely knows that, looking ahead at what she's going to have to say, she wants to give a citation where the only appropriate way to give it is to give an actual year, 1637. But then right in the beginning of her very opening sentence, talked about late in the 16th century, and there's different, so that's a different way of giving dates. And if this is a big book, you're allowed to use different ways to give dates. But if you're writing a 4-paragraph essay on something, it's better to do something. And especially 16. The two numbers 16 are a little. People reading 16th century, if they think about it, they'll know it's really the 1500s. But but still the 16 sticks in the head more than the semantics of the 15. So she would then change this to late in the 1500s in order to be consistent with her 1930s and 1630, and on getting the other ones in there. Then she says, here's a sentence. She said, impersonal substantives, on the other hand, serve less often than personal ones at the head of a kind of active verbs we modify with adverbs of manner. She says, this sentence is so horrid, I prefer to think I was drunk when I wrote it. To fix it, I have to rewrite the whole paragraph, sliding adverb of manner up earlier. So she's talking about something called an adverb of manner, and her point here is that there are different kinds of adverbs, and so she rewrites the sentence as follows. This will be in the notes. As with most adjectives, both of these hopefuls regularly produced -ly adverbs of manner. The kind of hopefulness that means expectant and eager produced adverbs more readily than the kind that means promising and bright. There's nothing mysterious about the difference in frequency. The pattern such and such which he displays here is very common. A person can carry himself hopefully or eye a desirable object hopefully or prepare himself hopefully for a possible future. Uses himself here. The pattern, impersonal noun, active verb, adverb of manner, is less common. Impersonal nouns serve less often than personal ones. Nonetheless, a wager can be shaping up hopefully, a day can begin hopefully, and so on. Now, this is the so this is a rewrite of the sentence that I think is worthwhile looking at, and somehow that paragraph, I guess the sentence wasn't great, but since it was embedded there in the middle, it didn't. It got by me. Okay, I was willing to accept anything by the time I had such a nice intro into the thing. I got another comment on hopefully from a teacher in the English department at Stanford. Jolie, I don't know. Well, you see. When you write something, you never know who you will be reaching. So now I don't know if this person is male or female, but so I can't refer to him or her by a pronoun. But I will say this. I will say that that Robin is teaching a class next quarter, English 191A, called Writing About Science. And that's why I thought I would get in communication and said that, and she commented about handout number 4. She thought that the current prissiness over hopefully was useful because she was taught as a graduate student he was taught, whoever Robin was taught, always to say something positive about every student paper. It's not always easy. This is, I shouldn't be putting this on TV, I'm sure. Neatly typed is really too patronizing and often inaccurate, but I can almost always say thank you for not abusing the word hopefully, since students avoid it like the plague. Well, now,
Question?
yes?
On that preceding paper, I noticed that, with the parentheses, formulae as the plural.
Oh, yes,
formula.
right here, yeah. Okay,
When did
formula
that
versus
disappear from
formula.
usage? Or is that still used?
Oh, well, you see, if you'll probably notice, Paul uses formulae in his notes and Tracy uses formulas, but and so I thought it must be British spelling. I take any chance to use my AE ligature now that I have it. In fact, I even write letters to people in Phoenix, Arizona, just so I can use the OE. Now, Bob Floyd sent me comments on hopefully, which is really gets to a point that I hope I remember to make. So first of all, he says, hopefully, he shows the American Heritage Dictionary, okay, which has a usage note. There's two versions of the American Heritage Dictionary. This one says, the use of hopefully to me is to be hoped, as in, hopefully we'll get there before dark, is grammatically justified by analogy to similar uses of happily and mercifully. However, this usage is by now such a bugbear to traditionalists that it is best avoided on grounds of civility, if not logic. Okay, and so Bob's comment on this is, American Heritage justifies it by analogy to happily and mercifully. I disagree. Mercifully we'll get there before dark equals, it is merciful that we will get there before dark, not I am merciful that we'll get there before dark. Hopefully we'll get there before dark means I am hopeful that we'll get there before dark. So he doesn't see the... one of the points of Mary Claire's essay, which he hadn't read at the time he sent me this note, was that hopeful is used in both senses, personal and impersonal. But I think the point is that there are a lot of people whose hackles get up, just as it says here. It's a bugbear to a lot of people, which means that it's very problematical to decide whether you're going to use it in the writing. As Mary Claire said in her essay, what should we do? Ignore the ignorant bully boys or knuckle under? And as for, she's made a point here. Well, then Bob sent me another note saying that there's an unabridged American Heritage Dictionary that has noted that only 44% of the usage panel will accept hopefully in the sense of it is to be hoped. So they have this percentage, William, whatever his name was, wrote to all of his usage people and gave them a long questionnaire about 2,000 words questions, and they all voted on it, and then he reports the statistics in it, and they're usually pretty interesting. So I think that's pretty good. 44% actually accept it. That's pretty good. But in fact, 56% do not. So it is a word that has problems just on the basis of you know that you're going to offend a certain number of people, even if you use it probably absolutely correctly. And so it's a matter of similar to the rules with quotation marks. If you want to help make the revolution towards the improvement, and consider that more of a risk than irritating some of the readers or distracting them away from the points you're trying to make for them, then you should by all means push on. Yeah.
I'm kind of confused by this discussion because in German there are two different verbs.
This is what I was just going to get to, and that was in other things that Bob sent to me, saying that yes, our friend here from Austria knows that hoffentlich is a very good German word, and in fact it has exactly the right meaning that everybody who misuses hopefully in America wishes that they had a word for, and this is the function is needed, and yeah. Go ahead.
The German word hoffentlich is it's used much more often than the hopefully in the other meaning. So it's
Yes.
very much more common word.
Yes, it's
The other word is hoffnungsvoll. Hoffnungsvoll.
Hoffmannsvoll. Okay, so it's and so there's yeah. So a couple of the things that I got here talk about Hoffentlich and it certainly fills the need. In fact, there are many other. The more you write, the more you realize there are words that just don't exist in English that we really have a need for. And in technical writing, the ones that I miss most often are verbs that imply that you're losing something instead of winning something. I mean, we have all kinds. We have sports writers will have 100 ways to describe the fact that Team A beat Team B. They bested them, they murdered them, etc., etc. They clobbered them. Now, how many is it for the opposite? What can you say that B did to A when B lost the game? There isn't such a thing. You have to say it in 2 or 3 words. And but in mathematical writing, we like to have the ability to have these words, and we don't always. We often are missing them. Now let's see. Well, I don't. This is I can't find what is this, Bernstein or somebody who had talked about hopefully and Hoffentlich. But some of the comments that Bob sent me were obviously from the people that Mary Claire was reading, where she got upset about the people who really didn't know what they were talking about, because some of the comments that have been said about it are pretty off the mark. Still, it's a matter of how much do you want to risk of offending the sensibilities of certain readers, as opposed to you can maybe get their goodwill by other things that you say, and so it can be important. Okay, now the next thing, I quoted Bob Floyd about exclamation points, and he said, I fear you misunderstood my attitude on exclamation points. They're correct after interjections, like ouch, after sentences that are exclamations like don't you dare, when exclaimed or shouted. And that's why they're called exclamation points. In informal writing, an author may be forgiven a few bangs on sentences one can imagine as exclamations, but a long sentence goes under the category exclamations we doubt ever got exclaimed. Okay. Now, so and then he showed me excerpts from dictionaries where they give a definition of exclamation point, and it always says something that follows an exclamation. Now that surprised me because. That surprised me, exclamation point, because nobody in the references that I saw seemed to ever suggest that exclamation point is ever used to convey surprise. Isn't that true, though, that sometimes you can, is this only in children's stories that this happened? That you say the bed was empty or something, but that's not, nobody was exclaiming it, but it was, or something. Paul, what do you think?
There is a writing device that works very well in that very context. To put an put parenthesis, exclamation point, close parenthesis, after a sentence for which you want to express surprise or an eyebrow raised.
Oh, okay. Eyebrow
and it doesn't violate the rule that you're now quoting, and at the same time makes the very point you want to make.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Right. Okay. Let's see. Bob says. Advice to always avoid splitting infinitives is unwise, and he sends me several references about that, and that's true that almost everybody says split infinitive is sometimes just the right thing to do, but because it puts when it puts the accent in the right way, but the bad examples tend to be where an unsplitting the infinitive gives an obviously improved sentence. The good examples are the ones where moving the adverb around make the sentence seem very forced. So it's a matter of ear there. He says about prepositions at the end of sentences. And then he gives some references there. He says, "You have no case, give up." and he ends it with up, of course. But I looked at the things, and I totally agree. I have no case. I mean, coming from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where half the population is German and is used to putting the first part of the preposition part of a verb at the end of their sentences. I probably overreacted to this, but English teachers do say this. Miss, what is her name? Miss Thornwhistle. What's her? The prototypical English teacher that people talk about. Says she would give, mark Miss Thistlebottom. There she is, up with which I will not put. Talks about the main idea is that the preposition provides strength at the end of a sentence, and a bad example is he felt it offered the best opportunity to do fundamental research in chemistry, which was what he had taken his Doctor of Philosophy degree in. And he says the end of a sentence is a conspicuous point, can be a strong point. The end of the sentence just quoted is like the last sputter of an engine going dead. That's the that's the thing about preposition. Okay. Okay. Let's see. He shows me Strunk and White about the word about using that. Strunk said something about where are we here? Exclamation points. Strunk and White. Well, he gave an example, something like, he said he was going, as being better than he said that he was going. And I agree, but you have the chance that, but you can parse it immediately because you know the word he is there in the sentence, because it's a pronoun, and so it has a different form as it would in another part of a sentence. So you don't. So the word that is not needed as a grammatical help to tell you what's coming up. But when we're doing technical writing, we're not usually talking about pronouns like this. But we usually are in a situation where there's some noun where we wouldn't know exactly what parts of speech we're looking at as we're coming into it. So I have found that often I put in the word that just in order to be a sort of silent helper. To parse it. Now, the final thing I wanted to discuss is a very interesting note I got from Dan Schroeder here about which versus that. Now, I know you thought you've heard everything about which versus that already, but I would like to say the final truth about that subject. If I can only find my Dan's comment here, I got to get it on my. Where are we here?
Can I ask a question while you're looking?
Yeah.
You can answer it.
Dave.
What about if then? Didn't you say at some point early in the quarter that you would always have a then if you had an if clause? If then or not?
What do you think?
I don't know.
You don't
the
know?
woman from the Chronicle got up and said, "What are all these thens doing here? It looks like it was translated from a programming language."
Well, I just saw the notes and it said that she had a sentence with many thens in it, one sentence with 4 or 5 thens in it, which could perhaps be broken into. However, I think there's a difference between newspaper writing and writing about mathematics in some cases where we're talking about implications of comments. Okay. Here we go. Good. So again, it's something that my wife and I may not agree on, but when I read something at speed and I find that I don't understand that I'm now getting to the conclusion, but if I put the word then in, I would understand that, then it helps. And it just ties in with the point I want to make now, is that I believe when we are reading something at speed for comprehension, we are using a part of our brain that's only doing simple parsing and not doing complicated logical reasoning as to what should be done. Now, I mean, it's simple enough that it can be done in a few cycles of our very slow computer inside of our heads, therefore. Well, let me show you the point at issue now. Now, I changed which to that in 5 places of Dan's term paper when he turned it in, and he thought that he would. He says, I must emphasize, in all 5 of these sentences I used which only after carefully considering whether that would be preferable. I have now considered each of them even more carefully and concluded that blindly changing which to that would be appropriate in at most one of the sentences. So he's willing to give me less than or equal 20% on this here. Now, let me explain my reasoning. And one of the main points I want to try to make is that maybe reasoning is not the thing involved here. That it's something that goes by too fast in your head to even care about reasoning. It's a matter of syntax more than semantics. And the sentence at issue is the second one here. Our discussion will contain many gaps which this approach from the bottom up cannot fill. And his comment is about sentence 2, saying that here I see no way to use that without implying that there are also gaps that this approach can't fill, that this approach can fill, and there aren't. In other words, he's saying since the word that is supposed to be used in a restrictive manner, you're not supposed to talk about the A that B unless there also exists some A that for which not B is true. I don't agree. I think that here we have a case where we have a grammatical construction where it's one way of attaching an attribute to A is saying B is also true about A. Now it's a strong way of doing it because it goes in a hurry and we're talking about the A that B. But I don't believe that whenever you read a sentence that has the word that in it, you also stop and say, now he's implying that this is restrictive. That I'm now getting an assertion from the author that a gap could fill some other approach or something like this. So I asked Mary Claire specifically about this, and she agreed that the word "that" would be preferable here. I mean, it's not. There's certainly no objection to it. And the point is, if you have to go back and rethink and use logic on a sentence, then it's not the kind of the way it seems to me, where my brain is going along reading it, just parsing it for meaning. This which catches me as something where there was a missing comma if it's going to be a which, without thinking about it. But if I have a gap here. I mean, if I have a that here, I would just attach this as a clause on, and I wouldn't really worry a great deal as to how restrictive it's being in the world. With
well, that point about an A that B, that better be an A that not B, sounds to me like a step in the direction of the disastrous possibility of making the syntactical correctness undecidable. That is, it depends on the content of the paragraph. Okay. And lots of people do make recommendations that amount to that when you analyze them.
Yeah, I think that if you have to go to a long dissertation about the logic of it, then it's missing the point of the way we actually read. That's my long dissertation on that subject. Now,
question on that also?
Question?
Wouldn't it be okay just to put the comma in and make that a non-restrictive clause, because we are saying, I mean, didn't we say that like all the gaps?
Oh yeah, well we've got various approaches here now, but anyway, Dan's rewrite is much better. He just decides to tear up the whole thing and start over. Of course, this intuitive bottom-up approach will contain many gaps. In other words, when you run into a problem, usually the best way is to just finesse it. Go, and Mary Claire would prefer saying bottom up with a hyphen instead of in quotes here. It's a matter of taste as far as I can see there, whether you want to apologize for using bottom-up in a physics book or
Can
not.
I summarize something there? I mean, I think in every one of those 5 sentences, there was a problem with the sentence. And on one hand, I did think that changing which to that was not the solution. Nevertheless, the fact that there was a possibly wicked witch pointed to other problems. And like you say, if you have to think that long about a sentence, there's something wrong with it in the first place.
But there's an automatic parsing provided by that, which is mostly a coupling of a noun to a property that I don't think, if you just want to couple a noun to a property quickly, you can do it better with that than with which. Now there was a very amusing case of left to right reading in Mary Claire's comment on another point, and says, even if coincident punctuation were a problem, the author's mistaken about where the which clause ends. Do you get this? I was expecting the next word to be judgment or opinion or something. The author's mistake, So, but she's talking now that was an interesting. So you have to look for the sentences to be able to understand as you where you are, not be surprised by the word about when it occurs at the beginning, especially if it occurs at the end of a line, of course. I see I'm a little bit over time. Thank you, Tracy. But I have to show you this. There's something about coincident punctuation here, which hadn't been brought up earlier in the course. So he said, coincident commas are not a sign of bad punctuation any more than the coincidence of a final comma and a period, or a final comma and a semicolon, or any 2 marks of punctuation. Where 2 commas coincide, we write only 1. She's talking about where you would have a sentence where there's 2 reasons to have a comma in one place, and she says there's no point. So when a comma and a period coincide, we write the period, etc. This is where a period and a period coincide, obviously. You see, I thought that was nice. A nice example there. Okay, I have gotten to the end of my list, and I want to thank you all for enduring this quarter, and I look forward to reading your term papers before 5 p.m. next week, Wednesday, sharp Pacific Standard Time. No, well, having them in my possession. Thank you.